down in Jefferson City and was part of the story and has been part of the story with Governor Greitens now for a while. Michael Hafner is our guest. He is a political consultant. The owner, can we plug your day business too?
Absolutely.
He's also part owner in I Love, what is it?
Juice Bar.
I Love Juice Bar, which is across the street from Schneidhorst. And you were, at some point, one of Eric Greitens' earliest campaign staffers?
I was on the ground floor in the embryonic stages of the campaign, in the first few months of the campaign. I was there along with one other staffer. So we had a front row view to a lot of the things
of what's going on. Now, you were also in the news because, and explain this because it gets very convoluted. You signed a piece of paper admitting what ethics violation?
So I never signed that. That was actually the campaign manager at the time. His name is Danny Laub. He was there at the same period I was.
Okay.
Eric and I parted ways in late March of 2015. Danny Laub was on the campaign, and unfortunately, he took the fall for contributing this fundraising list from the Michigan Continues to the campaign, which wasn't the truth.
Right.
And so that's what
So he signed the document unknowingly that it wasn't, that he was signing a document that wasn't true.
Sure. He was misled by a senior staffer of the governor's. And unfortunately, he got wrapped up in this on something that he didn't really have a role in.
Right.
And
because this Austin Chambers came to him and said, just sign this.
Yes.
And
yes.
so he said, sure, I'll sign it, sure.
Yeah.
Not knowing that he was signing, that he said that he took this email list.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and Danny Laub's testimony to the Attorney General was that Austin had conveyed to him that it was a BS complaint, BS ethics complaint.
Right.
And you don't mess with the Missouri Ethics Commission. And unfortunately, they went down that road, and that's why I've been wrapped up in this thing over the last 5 months.
Okay. Now, you in March of 2015, which in terms of the timeline was just a few weeks after Tom Schweik killed himself, you left the Greitens campaign and went to work for John Brunner.
I did. I started working for Mr. Brunner in August of 2015. So 4 to 5 months after Eric and I parted ways in March. You're right. Tom, tragically took his life in February, late February of 2015,
right.
And that changed the landscape of the governor's race.
One of the criticisms pointed at you in the testimony and in this story was that, hey, wait a minute. He worked for my political opponent. We were bitter rivals. Everything he says, take with a grain of salt because you worked for the guy who was trying to beat me.
That's true. I've heard a lot of that over the last 5 months, and the fact is that I had all that information from Eric's campaign. I could have used it in the primary. I could have turned over the donor list at that time in the primary to use politically against him. I didn't. I was perfectly content with leaving all this in the past. I was happy living my life.
Right.
And as soon as the news of the affair broke in early January, all those investigations really moved on from the affair pretty quick and kind of wrapped me back up into this. And so it wasn't my choice. I was subpoenaed multiple times to provide documents testimony.
So explain to us, you were part of this email list, and your testimony is that, Eric, well, you tell me what your testimony was, because you've been very forthcoming and very honest and very open about all this. And you haven't shied away when asked the other questions. You've answered them all to the best of your ability. But the story goes that Eric Greitens told you to take the list, asked you to take the list, took the list. What did you do with the list? And did what you were doing, did you know you were wrong doing it?
Sure. So, yes, I've testified to these events 20 to 25 hours under oath, which has been kind of nerve-wracking. But what happened was in the first days where I was working in a paid official capacity with Eric in early January of 2015, he provided me a fundraising list. The list was described as a Michigan Continues list. I had no idea the manner in which it was acquired or that it was acquired anything but lawfully.
Right.
And he directed me to use the list, and I met with him numerous times in January of 2015, and we went through that donor list line by line, and it had obviously a lot of contact information for high wealth individuals and billion-dollar foundations and companies that contributed to veterans' causes. And he gave me the notes, and I developed all those notes that he provided to me into a fundraising plan. And that's the truth. What happened? Apparently, according to other testimony, the list was utilized before that by the campaign. But according to what they filed with the Missouri Ethics Commission was that the list was provided to the campaign on March 1st of 2015, and that was just not accurate because the list was well in possession of the campaign 2 months before that.
And so the alleged crimes or the alleged misdeeds were, one, he obtained the list illegally and then blatantly used it for fundraising.
Correct.
So going line by line, how much can this guy give us? How much can that guy give us? There's no mistaking they were using it for political purposes.
Sure. Yeah. It was absolutely used for political purposes numerous months throughout the campaign.
Yeah.
And they had access to it well after I left as well.
Now, also, before it was a campaign, and this is kind of important too, because if you run for a office, you have to declare you're running very soon. Any campaign-related issues, you've got to announce you're a candidate. It seems like you were working on this list long before Eric Greitens was a quote-unquote official candidate.
Sure. A month and a half on my end, and then there was another staffer, Danny Laub, who was employed for a month before that, officially employed a month before that. So there were campaign expenditures being made. Again, I advised the governor in December, a month before I officially came on board, that he needed to open a committee if he was making expenditures on the campaign. That advice was disregarded. He was the guy in charge, and I went to work for him, and we moved forward. I was not in charge of the compliance reports with the MEC, but any campaign expenditures should have been reported. That's in the interest of public transparency.
Right. Why did you leave in March of 2015? Very early.
Yeah, so we had a difference of opinion. Some of the consultants that I was tied with, or that I was connected with, had a meeting with Eric and told him that if he ran for governor, if he was 100% running for governor, that they could not be with him because John Brunner at this time, in the same time period, was kind of making more inroads and having more discussions with political activists and influencers and people, and they believed, the consultants that I was tied with believed that John would be a better candidate, and if he ran, that they would be with him. Eric didn't like that too much, and because of that, because of my relationship with those consultants, Eric decided that he and I needed to take a quote strategic pause on our relationship. And what that meant for Eric was that in a couple months or a few months, if John had not decided to run, and these consultants went a different way, that I could be brought back onto the campaign. He told me, I'd make a great employee in the governor's office someday, and it was a very amicable parting of the ways. And
so there wasn't any, boy, I see this going down, I don't want to be a part of this, oh my goodness, I don't respect you. It was nothing like that.
No, I think there was a mutual respect for each other at that time.
Right.
Now, I will say, through 2014, I kind of acted as an informal advisor to Eric, and then was paid by him January through March of 2015. And during this whole time, he really misled us into believing that he was interested in running for another office other than governor. And it's not a big deal. It's
Right.
Looking back, it's not a big deal. He's an ambitious guy, but at the time, we did connect him and did a lot of work for him under the pretense that he was interested in running for another office.
He also told Tom Schweik that he wasn't going to run for governor if Tom Schweik was going to run for governor.
Yeah, and Tom Schweik was 100% set in,
and so even though Tom Schweik killed himself, that then quote unquote opened the door for Eric Greitens. We now know he was planning to run for governor regardless of what happened with Tom Schweik.
The testimony that's been released has indicated that he settled on the office of governor early in 2014, so literally a year before I was even in a working paid relationship with him.
You testified, Michael Hafner with us, one of the early campaign staffers for Eric Greitens. You testified that part of going line by line was to hide the people who are giving you massive amounts of money. Talk about that for a moment.
So there were some discussions early on in the campaign, and this has been a major focus of testimony that I've provided. There were discussions being had about certain donors, about reaching out to certain donors and creating a mechanism for them to give money without having to disclose who they are. So what we call, LLCs, C4s, that operate in the political world, where you don't have to have that other level of government transparency in campaigns,
right.
And so there were discussions being had about setting up some of these entities in different states that could, where you could funnel money to and not have to disclose where it came from. And it's a really legal gray area in political campaigns, but it is circumventing the law and the purpose of transparency regulations.
They say he did this. They say other politicians have done it. He's done it on steroids.
Absolutely. There were millions of dollars that he came in the primary alone. There was over $6 million between the LG PAC and the Seals for Truth money that came in and influenced that governor's race in 2016 on behalf of Eric, and no one knows where it came from, where the original source of the money was from. It was routed through ghost corporations in Texas and some other really odd entities, and it was for the sole purpose of not having to disclose where it came from. And it's very. He's certainly not the first politician that's done it, but it was on a level that we've never seen before in Missouri politics.
Why would a person want to give money to a politician and not know that it came from them?
There's a number of reasons why donors would want to stay anonymous. A lot of times you see this in different issues. Somebody will give to a progressive organization or a very conservative organization and not want any scrutiny because of they're giving a lot of money. I think it's the same as when you're heavily funding a political candidate. You don't want to see as trying to make them your pet.
So you want to buy him, but you don't want to know.
That's
people.
Another way of putting it.
You don't want people to know how much influence you have over that person.
That's definitely another way of putting it.
I got a break. Can you hold?
Absolutely.
Michael Hafner with us. He is still a political consultant. Testified yesterday in Jefferson City. Was one of Eric Greitens' early campaign staffers, and is nice enough to come and spend some time and answer questions. More with him in a moment. Let me tell you about